meant to fight.
The story begins in the tranquil gardens of Edenia, where King Jerrod stands beside his only daughter, Kitana. The late afternoon sun catches the silver threads of his crown as he reaches into a velvet pouch and lifts a delicate necklace, its pendant fashioned in the likeness of a lightning bolt. He presses it into Kitana's palm, his voice low but steady. "This was given to me by Lord Raiden," he says. "If ever the shadows close around you, call upon it, and the thunder shall answer." The necklace is more than a piece of jewelry. It is a quiet promise of protection, a tether to a power that reaches beyond the borders of Edenia. The peace of the moment shatters the instant the horn of war sounds. Word spreads through the palace gardens like a crack of lightning. Shao Kahn, the iron-fisted ruler of Outworld, has arrived with his massive army. Jerrod turns to his daughter, his eyes hardened by resolve. "War is not coming, Kitana," he tells her. "It is already here. The fate of our realms will not be decided by the size of an army, but by an ancient contest." He explains the rules that have governed the balance between worlds for centuries. A tournament in which the first realm to claim 10 consecutive victories gains the right to rule the other. 10 straight wins and Edenia's sovereignty will be theirs. A loss and it will be lost forever. Edenia's best warriors have already fallen in battles past. Only the king remains to stand against the menace from Outworld. With a heavy heart, Jerrod gathers his royal guard and heads toward the field where the tournament will be staged. The air is thick with the metallic scent of blood and the low, foreboding murmur of the gathered crowds. At the center of the arena, Jerrod raises his voice so that it carries over the clamor. "No creature shall ever bow to Shao Kahn," he declares. The proclamation is met with a roar of defiance that barely masks the tremor of fear in his throat. Shao Kahn steps forward, his massive frame casting a long shadow across the stone. With a sneer that borders on mockery, he lifts a massive stone statue of Jerrod that has been erected as a tribute and hurls it to the ground. The crash reverberates through the arena, a prelude to the carnage about to unfold. For a fleeting instant, hope flares in Jerrod's eyes. He charges, sword drawn, and the clash of steel sparks across the arena. Yet Shao Kahn's strength is of a different order. He grabs Jerrod's forearm, twists, and with a brutal efficiency, pulls the king's fingers from his hand. The crowd gasps as the king staggers, blood curling from the youth's wounds. Before Jerrod can recover, Shao Kahn drives a jagged blade through his chest, ending the life of Edenia's monarch in a single merciless stroke. The death takes place before the eyes of his wife, Queen Sindel, and his daughter Kitana, each of them frozen in a tableau of horror and disbelief. When the blade is withdrawn, Shao Kahn raises his arms and the heavens seem to respond. A pall of darkness slides across the sky, and the moon takes on a deep, blood-red hue, an omen that the world has shifted irrevocably. "Edenia belongs to me now," the conqueror roars, his voice echoing off the stone walls. Queen Sindel, her grief raw and palpable, tries to push through the ranks of Outworld soldiers that block her path to her husband's body. A guard steps forward, his sword pointed at her throat. "Kneel or die," he commands, his tone leaving no room for mercy. One by one, the surviving members of Edenia bow their heads, their spirits broken, their wills bent to the new ruler. Kitana, however, remains still. She does not lower herself. Instead, she steps forward, her gaze never wavering. She reaches down, lifts the fallen king's hand, and takes from it a small blue ribbon that had once been tied to his ceremonial armor. The ribbon, a simple strip of cloth, becomes the emblem of his legacy, a reminder that the blood of Edenia still runs in her veins. Shao Kahn steps close, his eyes narrowed. "Your father should never have brought you into this world," he snarls. "From now on, you will be mine, as his daughter and as my servant." The words cut deeper than any blade. Years pass. The blue ribbon never leaves Kitana's hair. It is the only thread that ties her to the past and to the memory of the man who tried to protect her. Under Shao Kahn's oppressive rule, she is trained in the arts of war, her skill sharpened until it rivals the myths of the old champions. In the present moment, Kitana trains alongside Jade, her close companion and fellow Edenian exile. Their spar reaches a fevered pitch. Jade's strikes are swift, her movements a blur. At first, Jade appears dominant, pushing Kitana to the brink and urging her to abandon the fight. Yet Kitana does not rely solely on brute strength. She slides the blue ribbon from her hair, flinging it toward Jade as a distraction. In that instant, she feints, pivots, and lands a precise blow that knocks Jade off balance. The victory is not earned by raw power alone. It is secured by quick thinking and an unbreakable will. After the bout, the two walk back toward the palace. Jade pauses, looking thoughtfully at Kitana. 20 years. Ago, the Emperor chose you to be his personal guard, she says. He knew what Shao Kahn would take from you. Their relationship, forged in the crucible of shared loss, has become as strong as sisterhood. Jade gifts Kitana a finely crafted fan, its delicate ribs concealing razor-thin blades. The fan is elegant, a perfect complement to Kitana's graceful combat style, and it carries with it the whisper of vengeance that both women hold close to their hearts. Word spreads quickly through the realms that the ancient tournament is about to begin. Shao Kahn addresses the assembled fighters, his voice booming across the arena. The gods themselves shall bear witness to these contests, he proclaims, invoking the names of the celestial deities. His declaration makes clear that this is no ordinary competition. The stakes are cosmically high. From the shadows, Shang Tsung steps forward, his eyes glinting with malice. He announces a new quest, a relic stolen from Raiden's temple, a powerful amulet capable of healing any wound, has been taken by Kano. The amulet is said to weigh as much as a mountain, and can only be borne by one with strength close to that of a god. Recovering it will become a side mission that threatens to intertwine with the main tournament. As Shao Kahn's proclamation reverberates, Lord Raiden gathers the champions of Earthrealm in a secluded mountain monastery. He speaks, gravely. Once the tournament ends, the realms will plunge into total war. The fate of every world hangs on the outcome. We need a champion for each discipline, and we are still missing one. He then summons Johnny Cage, the once famous movie star turned fighter, to the gathering. Cage's introduction is played for both humor and tragedy. In his mind, he imagines himself vanquishing multiple opponents with elegant flair. In reality, he is signing autographs for a handful of indifferent fans, a reminder that his fame has dimmed. The scene cuts to his modest trailer where he packs his gear. A soft knock on the door introduces Lord Raiden and Sonya Blade. They explain that the reward for joining the tournament is not treasure or applause, but the salvation of humanity itself. Raiden tells Cage that the gods have chosen him as one of Earthrealm's champions, and that the outcome will decide the world's destiny. Cage scoffs, laughing it off until Raiden tears open a swirling portal in front of him. The shimmering vortex proves that this is no idle story. Step through, Rain commands, and discover the man you truly are. While Raiden speaks, the camera pans to the other Earthrealm champions, Jax Briggs, the cybernetic soldier, Cole Young, a descendant of the great Hanzo Hasashi, and Liu Kang, the monk who can command fire. In a brief montage, a solemn voice notes the death of Kung Lao, slain by Shang Tsung, a stark reminder of the lethal enemy they face. Cage, shaken, declares he wants out. I'm not ready to die, he admits, his bravado collapsing. Sonya Blade answers without hesitation. That is exactly why this is called Mortal Kombat. His nervousness only fuels Raiden's fury. The Elder God reminds him that Earth has been challenged 9 times and has lost every battle. Now, 20 years later, Shao Kahn seeks the final decisive victory. The other champions intervene, urging him to stay. Cole Young shares a personal confession. Before joining the conflict, he said goodbye to his wife and daughter, the 2 most important people in his life. If we fall, he says, we lose more than a fight. We lose Earth itself and any chance of holding the ones we love again. Sonya adds that despite his faded stardom, Cage once held 10 black belts and could have been a legend. Yet Cage remains unmoved. He turns away as Raiden opens another portal, muttering sarcastically, "Good luck saving the world," before walking away. In Outworld, Shao Kahn performs a dark ritual to resurrect a fallen warrior. He denounces Raiden, calling him a fraud, and declares that destiny now bends to Outworld's will. The ritual summons Kano's corpse. Simultaneously, Johnny Cage, unable to escape his despair, finds himself in a gritty tavern, drowning in whiskey. A stranger approaches, yet Cage, bruised by time, admits that his career is a relic of a bygone era. Nobody remembers him any longer. Back in the shadows of Outworld, the necromancer Quan Chi completes Kano's resurrection. Upon awakening, Kano's mind seizes on a single image: Sonya Blade, the moment she ripped his eye from his face. That memory fuels his hatred, sharpening his resolve to retrieve the stolen amulet. On Earthrealm's side, Raiden formally opens the tournament. He explains the structure. Each match will feature 2 fighters. The victors advance, the losers are eliminated. Sonya Blade is selected as one of the first competitors. As she prepares, Johnny Cage watches old footage of his glory days on a cracked screen. In an instant, a blast of light envelops him, and he is pulled through a portal into Outworld, forced into combat despite his protests. Meanwhile, Quan Chi interrogates Kano about the amulet. After a moment of confusion, Kano rummages through his belongings and produces the artifact, a glimmering talisman encased in dark metal. At that moment, Kitana steps onto the battlefield, intending to deliver the amulet to Shao Kahn. As she does, a strange sigil appears on her skin, a mark linking her directly to the tournament's mystical essence. The symbol pulses, hinting at a deeper connection between Kitana and the contest she has been forced to join. Kitana confronts Johnny Cage, explaining the basic mechanics of the tournament. She describes how each successful strike represents a fighter's place on either side, and the war ends only when one realm exhausts its champions. Her explanation is concise, underscoring the fatal balance that will decide the fate of all worlds. The narrative thus weaves together the threads of duty, loss, and redemption. From the Garden of Edenia, where a king gives his daughter a protective charm through the brutal clash that ends his reign, to the training that sharpens a princess into a warrior, the tale moves forward. The ancient tournament, summoned by Shao Kahn, becomes the crucible in which champions from Earthrealm, Johnny Cage, Sonya Blade, Jax, Liu Kang, Cole Young, must prove themselves. The lingering quest for the amulet, the necromancy that revives Kano, and the ominous red moon that hangs over Edenia all amplify the sense that every choice reverberates across realms. As the combatants step onto the field, each aware that the outcome will carve a new future, the story settles into a tense, neutral rhythm. The characters act not as caricatures but as beings shaped by loss and purpose. The promise of protection that began as a simple necklace now echoes in a blue ribbon, a fan with hidden blades, and the resolve that drives Kitana, Jade, and the Earthrealm defenders forward. The stage is set, the gods have taken notice, and the mortal combat that follows will decide whether darkness will swallow the worlds, or if light, though battered, will endure. Kitana burst onto the arena before Johnny could even register the crowd's roar. The moment her lithe form cut across the steel-reinforced floor, the clash began. Johnny Cage, still reeling from the sudden shift in reality that had thrust him into this brutal showcase, barely had time to lift his arms. Reflex alone kept him from being knocked flat. Instinct drove him to toss a defensive block, a desperate palm strike that scraped the air. The sheer momentum of Kitana's attacks forced him backward, his back hitting the cold wall of a warehouse-like outpost. He scrambled up the nearest stairwell, heart hammering, and vaulted onto a sloping roof, hoping the elevation would offer a sliver of concealment. Above the tumult, Shao Kahn sat upon a throne of obsidian, his eyes twin pits of calculation. He watched the combatants like a hunter observing prey, noting the way Kitana's movements were fluid, each kick slicing the space between them, with a grace that belied lethal intent. Johnny's frantic scrambling did little to impress the Emperor. The cage-like arena was his domain, his arena, and he measured every shift of weight, every glimmer of fear. Kitana, her eyes still smoldering with the fire of imperial duty, finally caught her breath and delivered a decisive blow that sent Johnny sprawling through the broken window of the roof. Yet, instead of delivering a fatal finishing move, she stepped back, letting his battered form tumble to the ground. As the dust settled, a pulse of crimson energy surged through the portal that had brought them here, and Johnny was ripped from the rooftop and spat out into the dimly lit hallway of his own team's base, the taste of near-death clinging to his tongue. The arena's atmosphere shifted once more as Sindel, the silver-haired queen of Edenia, and now the consort of Shao Kahn, rose from the shadows. Her presence turned the air cold. The very walls seemed to bow under the weight of her authority. She was paired against Sonya Blade, a veteran of countless wars whose resolve was famed across realms. Sindel's voice, resonant and unyielding, echoed through the Colosseum as she declared her devotion to the Emperor. He has shown me eternity, and I have embraced the endless night of his power. With those words, a low, resonant hum began to emanate from her throat. Each scream she unleashed rippled outward, a shockwave of sound that slammed into Sonya like a wall of invisible force, pushing her back and breaking the rhythm of her attacks. Sonya, muscles coiled and mind sharp despite the onslaught, refused to surrender. She slipped between the waves, leveraging the environment, scraping metal pipes, turning hard angles into avenues of attack. A sudden feint caught Sindel off guard. Sonya ducked under a reverberating blast, spun, and drove a fist into the queen's ribcage, the impact echoing like a drumbeat in the hushed arena. The second she struck, Sindel's scream faltered, and Sonya seized the opening, delivering a crippling combo that sent the Edenian monarch crashing to the floor. The referee's hand fell, the count ran out, and Sonya's breath came hard, her chest rising and falling with the effort of a warrior who had fought against a god's echo and lived to tell the tale. With the victory, Sonya was whisked back to the Temple of Earthrealm, the portal humming a low note as it closed behind her. Johnny Cage, still dizzy from his sudden ejection, materialized beside a stony altar where Lord Raiden waited, his eyes alight with static. "Cage," the thunderous god intoned, "your survival was a miracle. The rules would have condemned you to death, but the cosmos has other plans." Raiden's voice was gentle yet carried the gravitas of worlds. He placed a hand on Johnny's shoulder, signaling that the young actor-fighter still had purpose in the larger tapestry of the tournament. At the same time, a murky side room filled with the scent of incense and ozone. Kano stood before the cloaked figure of Quan Chi, the necromantic sorcerer whose promises had pulled him from the grave. "You owe me a new eye," Kano snarled, fingers curling around the scarred socket where his missing pupil once lay. "And the amulet. Return it." Quan Chi's lips curled into a thin smile, his voice a rasping whisper. "Ignorant fool, the amulet never belonged to you. Its power is not a trinket to be bartered." Yet the sorcerer's hand trembled, betraying the flicker of a pact unfulfilled. With a wavering motion, he traced a sigil in the air and a soft scarlet light enveloped Kano's eye socket. The missing pupil snapped into place, its crimson glow illuminating the dark, and granting Kano once more his signature laser beam attack, a thin blade of pure energy that streaked across the shadows. Lightning crackled in the chambers above when Raiden called Johnny to his side once more. "The gods have chosen you, Cage, not by chance but by design. Within you lies a spark that has yet to be kindled, a potential you have never allowed yourself to see. When the realm stands on the edge of ruin, that spark must blaze." The words settled upon Johnny like the echo of a distant drum, reverberating through his very bones. Elsewhere, Kitana slipped through a concealed stone doorway, clutching a delicate necklace her father had bequeathed to her, a relic of ancient Edenian blood that served as a conduit for the Thunder God's power. She whispered to the crystal and the world shifted. A hidden corridor opened, granting her access to Raiden's inner sanctum. The god greeted her with a solemn nod, and the champions gathered as she stepped forward, her eyes bright with resolve. "I have been your eyes within the Empire," she announced, "the ears that hear the Emperor's whisper, and the hands that feel the pulse of his heart." She turned toward Johnny, a trace of remorse softening her regal bearing. "I forced you into a fight that seemed cruel, but the Emperor watches everything. I had to make the conflict appear genuine, lest my betrayal be uncovered." She paused, the weight of her next confession heavy in the cramped space. "Shao Kahn already possesses the amulet. If he learns to bind its power to his flesh, he will become near unstoppable, his reach extending beyond the borders of any realm." Kitana's gaze shifted to the far corner where Jade, her closest confidant, stood in a dim pool of light, a silent sentinel. "Jade remains in the tournament," Kitana continued, "but she has sworn absolute loyalty to the Emperor. He has rewritten her oath, shaping her into his blade. If it comes to our final moments, I beg you, do not strike her down. She will be a weapon for the Emperor regardless of our wishes. The tournament pressed on, 3 battles remaining, each one a step toward a conclusion none could predict. From the shadows emerged Kung Lao, resurrected by the tyrant of Outworld and now a twisted version of his former self. The Emperor's hand forced the razor-sharp hat of the Shaolin disciple into a weapon, its brim extending into a blade that seemed to drink the very light around it. Kung Lao's arrival was marked by raw, unbridled aggression. His first swing aimed directly at Raiden, the Thunder God's staff crackling under the assault. In another dim alcove, the sorcerer tasked with guarding the amulet stared at the jeweled artifact, its inner core pulsing like a captured heartbeat. Before he could make a move, Quan Chi reappeared, his robes swirling like dark smoke. He snatched the amulet from the sorcerer's grip, his eyes glittering with a cold intellect. "The relic does not belong to mortals," he declared, voice resonant with ancient authority. "It must merge with a soul of flesh, granting eternity that is not—" He trailed off, the implication hanging heavy. A sudden roar filled the chamber as a metallic construct, a jagged device forged from the essence of thunder and steel, descended toward the Emperor's chest. Its purpose was clear, to channel Raiden's power directly into Shao Kahn's heart, an act that could either bind the Elder God's fury or rupture the veil between realms. Kitana observed from a balcony, her eyes reflecting the storm of energies swirling below. She sensed that the delicate equilibrium between Earthrealm and Outworld was on the brink of shattering. The next combat unfolded with brutal clarity. Shao Kahn, a towering monolith of flesh and iron, faced Cole Young, the human champion of Earthrealm, whose resolve was as fierce as the rivers that fed his homeland. The Emperor's grin widened as he sensed the blood of Scorpion's line, a lineage tied to the vengeful spirit of Hanzo Hasashi, flowing within Cole. The clash was a savage ballet. Shao Kahn's hammer slammed down like a mountain, Cole's agility keeping him barely ahead. In the end, the tyrant's relentless fury crushed the young man's defenses. The ground trembled as Cole's body hit the floor, his life extinguished in a spray of crimson that stained the arena. Simultaneously, Jax Briggs squared off with Jade, Kitana's once trusted ally now forged into a weapon of the Emperor's will. Jade's movements were precise, each step a testament to the discipline she had honed under Shao Kahn's command. Jack's muscles coiled like springs, matched her strike for strike, his bionic arms delivering thunderous blows that rang through the stone walls. When Jade finally fell, gasping, Jack stepped back, his expression softened. "Your friend showed mercy to one of ours," he murmured. "Honor demands I return. It." He extended a hand, helping her to her feet before disappearing into the shadows, the echo of his words lingering like a promise. The final showdown pitted Liu Kang against the corrupted Kung Lao. The air was thick with the scent of ozone and ash as the two old friends, once brothers in arms, drew upon reservoirs of power forged over lifetimes of battle. Liu Kang's anger was palpable, his fists a tempest of fire that seared the arena's floor. Kung Lao, his eyes blackened by the Emperor's dark resurrection, responded with a lethal precision, each strike of his hat blade cutting through the haze. "You were my brother," Liu Kang shouted, his voice cracking with grief. "We fought side by side, not as enemies." Kung Lao's response was cold, his tone a whisper of inevitability. "When our realms collapse, when both our bodies have turned to dust, then perhaps we will be brothers again." The battle surged forward, each combatant delivering blows that could fracture mountains. Kung Lao's power surged, pushing Liu Kang to the edge of exhaustion. In a desperate gambit, Liu Kang summoned the Thunder God's favor, channeling a burst of lightning that surged through his palm and into Kung Lao's chest. The impact was swift and irrevocable. Kung Lao staggered, his eyes widening in disbelief, before slumping to the ground, the darkness within him extinguished. Gasping, Liu Kang fell to his knees, his body trembling, and whispered, "I am sorry, brother. There was no other way." As he rose, the portal that had once linked worlds flickered, its edges fraying, and Raiden, bloodied, barely clinging to life, appeared, his cloak ragged. "You have become my son," the Thunder God croaked, his voice a trembling echo of ancient storms. The bond between them, forged in battle and sacrifice, shone like a shaft of light cutting through the gloom. Word of the Emperor's renewed might spread like wildfire. Shao Kahn, emboldened by the stolen amulet, ordered the resurrection of Sub-Zero, the ice-clad warrior whose chilling presence could freeze the blood of any who opposed him. He would be thrust back onto the battlefield, another pawn in the tyrant's ever-expanding arsenal. Meanwhile, Kitana returned to Raiden, urgency in her steps. "The thunder portal that sustains us is weakening," she warned, her voice tight. "It cannot hold much longer. And Cole Young, his fate is sealed. He is gone." She pressed a trembling hand to Raiden's chest, her fingers brushing the ancient symbols etched there. "The Emperor has absorbed the essence of a god. His power is nearly boundless. Direct confrontation will end only in annihilation." She traced the outline of a forgotten passage in the sandstone walls, a tunnel once used by the Tarkatans to ferry supplies beneath the palace. "We have a hidden route. It is unguarded, forgotten by the Empire's watchful eyes. Through it we might strike, unseen." Before the plan could be set in motion, betrayal struck. Jade, having learned of Kitana's secret alliance with Raiden, revealed the treachery to Shao Kahn's commanders. The Imperial forces swarmed the hidden alcove, capturing Kitana and binding her in cold iron shackles. The Queen's eyes burned with fury, yet her resolve remained unbroken. She would not betray the cause she believed in. On the Earthrealm side, the champions scattered, seeking assistance among the Tarkatans. Their path led them to Baraka, the feral warlord whose royal teeth glinted in the dim light of the cavernous halls. Liu Kang approached him, desperation etched on his face. "Our people have suffered under Shao Kahn's reign, treated as beasts, trampled beneath his boot." He extended a hand, hoping to forge an alliance. Baraka's eyes narrowed, his voice a guttural snarl. "Your suffering is of no concern to me. The Empire's might is absolute, and I have no desire to tempt fate." Liu Kang's plea fell on deaf ears. He raised a fist, ready to settle the dispute with steel, but Baraka brushed him away with a disdainful wave. The tension in the cavern rose, the air thick with imminent violence. At that precise moment, Johnny Cage shoved forward, his voice cracking the silence. "You think you're scary, Baraka? You're nothing but a frightened beast, hiding behind a mask of teeth," he called out, his words sharp, daring the Tarkatan to confront his fear. "One day you'll have to answer to your own blood, to the very people you claim to protect. Show us the warrior you truly are?" The insult struck a chord deep within Baraka's pride, a spark igniting beneath his savage exterior. Baraka snarled, his pulse quickening. "You, human, expect me to bow to you?" He glared at Johnny, the arena's dim light catching the savage edge of his claws. "Very well." He turned, not toward Liu Kang, but toward the cocky actor-fighter who had called his bluff. The arena erupted in a roar as the two figures faced each other, the crowd's trill a deafening tide. Johnny's heart raced, his mind flashing through every stunt he'd performed, every fight scene that had earned him fame. The ground shook as Baraka launched his first charge, his massive blade swinging in a deadly arc that would have cleaved a mountain. Johnny ducked, rolled, and with a swift pivot delivered a well-timed uppercut that sent Baraka's head snapping back. The audience gasped, the sound of fists meeting flesh reverberating through the cavern. Baraka's eyes flared with fury. He unleashed a barrage of slashes, each one a blur of steel and tremor. Johnny, forced onto the defensive, recalled his training, his body moving on instinct. He ducked under, a swing, grabbed Baraka's forearm, and used the Tarkatan's momentum to hurl him into a stone pillar. The impact cracked the ancient masonry, dust blooming around them. Barakan smirked through the pain, his gash-filled mouth forming a guttural laugh. "You think this is a game?" Johnny's breath came in ragged bursts, his cheeks flushed with a mixture of adrenaline and defiant pride. "If you think this is a game, you've never lived a life where the spotlight is a lie." He threw a rapid series of punches, each one landing with the precision of a choreographed strike, but the ferocity of a real battle. The rhythm of his blows forced Baraka onto the defensive, forcing the Tarkatan to retreat, his claws flashing dimly in the low light. The tide turned as Johnny found his groove. He remembered the words of his mentor, the flicker of hope that once led him onto the stage of a different kind of theater, one where he fought for something larger than applause. With renewed vigor, he spun, delivering a spectacular roundhouse kick that struck Baraka's chest, sending the warlord sprawling onto the cold stone floor. For a moment, the arena fell silent, the only sound the distant rumble of an unsettled thunderstorm outside the palace walls. Baraka rose slowly, eyes narrowed, blood dripping from a wound on his forehead. He extended a massive hand, palm open, as if to offer a truce in the midst of their clash. "You have earned your victory, human," he grunted, "but know this, you have fought well, and I will remember your name." Johnny lowered his arms, a wry grin spreading across his face. "Remember it, then. The next time we meet, we'll see if you still have those teeth." He turned away, his head held high, the crowd's roar returning in a crescendo that celebrated his unexpected triumph. The battle's conclusion left the arena battered and the champion's spirits battered but unbroken. Kitana, still bound within the Emperor's stronghold, strained against her iron shackles, her mind racing with strategies to reverse the tide. Shao Kahn, bolstered by the stolen amulet, paced his throne, his mind already plotting the next move. How to harness the artifact's divine energy to cement his rule across all realms. Outside the palace, the Tarkatans whispered of the improbable victory, their war cries softened by newfound respect for the human who had stood against them. Liu Kang, though bruised, felt the ember of hope rekindling within him. The hidden tunnel beneath the castle, long forgotten, offered a silent promise. A passage through which allies could move unseen, a corridor that might yet allow the champions to strike at the heart of Shao Kahn's empire. In the swelling darkness, the thunder god Raiden gathered his remaining strength, his eyes flickering like storm clouds. He turned to Kitana, whose eyes shimmered with fierce determination, and whispered, "Our time is near. When the portal fails, we must act. The amulet cannot be allowed to augment his already boundless power. If we are to save our worlds, we must strike at the core. Steel, flesh, and spirit intertwined." Their pact, forged in secrecy and sacrifice, set the stage for the final act of a tournament that had become more than a contest of strength. It had become a battle for the very soul of existence. The night stretched onward, the stars above the Outworld citadel glimmering like distant witnesses. The champions, bruised yet unyielding, prepared for the endgame. Each heartbeat echoed a promise that even in the face of a tyrant who had stolen a god's essence, there still existed a sliver of hope, a hidden tunnel, a resurrected ally, a merciless fighter who had learned humility, and a queen willing to betray her own throne for the greater good. The war was far from over, and the realms held their breath, waiting for the moment when the thunder portal would finally snap, when the amulet's power would either be unleashed or destroyed, and when the final strike would decide whether darkness would swallow all, or the light, though flickering, would endure. Baraka walked ahead of the group, his heavy footfalls echoing against the stone walls that rose, like a dark spine beyond the castle's outer rampart. The Tarkatans were only permitted to venture so far, and at the fringe of the fortified grounds he stopped, turning with a measured nod toward the men and women who had fought beside him. "From here you must go on your own," he said, the words heavy with respect for the warriors he was leaving behind. The party lingered a moment, their eyes lingering on the jagged silhouette of the citadel before parting ways. Johnny Cage placed a firm hand on the shoulder of his companion, his voice low but earnest. "I'll be back," he promised. "One day I'll finish what I started here." The pledge hung in the cool air, a thin thread that might one day be pulled taut into a future alliance. Across the courtyard, the Emperor Shao Kahn reclined upon a throne of blackened iron, his presence a visual storm of menace and authority. Kitana approached, her steps precise, her face an unreadable mask of poise. Khan's eyes flickered and he smiled cruelly. "Your mother has been returned," he announced, the words dripping with malice. "But should you think the same fate will be easy to reverse, remember that a shattered skull does not resurrect itself." Kitana's composure did not falter. "I came to Earthrealm searching for Lord Raiden," she replied, her voice steady, "but I found neither him nor his champions. I have no knowledge of their whereabouts. From this moment, I stand alone." The Emperor's grin widened. "Then you shall remain here, a cautionary monument for any who would think to defy me." He raised a command, and metal shackles fell around Kitana's wrists, clinking ominously in the open plaza. The cold links were a promise that her rebellion would be a public spectacle. Jade slipped forward, her eyes locked on the throne. Kahn's gaze landed on the young kunoichi, and his voice softened into a mock tender recollection. "You remember, child, that I rescued you as a babe. I have always placed my trust in you." A thin smile curled his lips, a momentary flicker of twisted paternalism in the midst of his tyranny. Meanwhile, Liu Kang had slipped away from the main force, his steps silent as he scouted ahead for the fabled amulet that could tip the balance of the war. He stopped a short distance from the Emperor's dais and called out, his tone bold despite the danger. "Khan!" The accusation landed like a spear. Shao Kahn laughed, a deep, resonant sound that seemed to shake the very stones beneath them. "You think you can stand against me, Dragon's last son?" Liu Kang's eyes burned. "I am the heir of the dragon's fire," he declared, and with a roar he unleashed the full fury of his training. Flames that licked the air, fists that cracked the ground, a torrent of chi that surged toward the Emperor. Yet Khan's power dwarfed Liu Kang's onslaught. The Emperor's armor absorbed each strike like rain on iron. In the midst of the clash, Liu Kang's gaze fell upon a glint of blue light amidst the debris, a faint outline of the amulet. Before he could press his advantage, a familiar bulk crashed through the courtyard wall. Jax Briggs, his cybernetic arms whirring with hydraulic precision. "Need a hand, old friend?" he shouted, lunging toward the shimmering relic. One by one, the rest of the team emerged from the shadows. Sonya Blade, her eyes narrowed, Kano, the ever-sly mercenary, and even the reluctant physician Sector, each driven by the promise that the amulet could end Khan's reign. But the Emperor was a tide that refused to be turned. With a sweep of his gauntleted hand, he sent Jax crashing into the stone, the metal limbs sparking against the ground. Sonya lunged, only to be forced back by a sudden gust of dark energy that slammed the courtyard doors shut. Kano, ever the opportunist, darted toward Johnny Cage, his laser eye gleaming. "Listen, Cage," Kano hissed, his voice a mixture of threat and plea. "I can save you both. Look at this." He angled his gaze, and a thin, crimson beam cut through the air, vaporizing a nearby statue in an instant. The demonstration of his weapon's lethal precision was a cruel bargain. His allegiance could shift, but only if the amulet could be seized. Beyond the immediate melee, Jade slipped away toward the trembling figure of Kitana, her own blade sheathed behind her back. "I warned you not to follow this path," she whispered, the words heavy with regret. "But there's still a chance to turn back. Plead with the Emperor, beg for mercy. He cannot stand alone when his power wanes." Kitana's eyes hardened, the fire within them refusing to dim. "I will not kneel to anyone," she replied, and without another word she stepped away, leaving Jade to stare at the empty throne, her heart a storm of conflicted loyalties. Kano, having convinced himself that the tides were turning, approached Johnny once more. "I'm switching sides," he announced, his tone earnest despite the lingering smell of smoke on his breath. Outworld, Edenia. They are dying places, void of simple joys, of dance, of laughter. The Emperor has taken the amulet to the Netherrealm, a furnace of endless torment. If we can shatter it, his strength will crumble, the balance will return, and Earth will have a chance. The thunder god Raiden, whose presence crackled like distant thunder, hovered nearby. "The Netherrealm is a prison of fire and sorrow," he warned, his voice echoing over the battlefield. "I cannot guarantee my return for those who tread its depths. You may become lost there forever." Johnny's eyes narrowed, his resolve hardening. "Then we have no choice," he said. "If we do not try, we are already dead." He gave a quick, solemn nod to Raiden, acknowledging the need for a guide to survive the infernal landscape. The decision was made. The fire of determination lit the night. When they breached the portal to the Netherrealm, a wave of scorching heat hit them like a physical blow. The sky was a canvas of ember, and rivers of molten lava flowed like blood. The very stones seemed to pulse with agony. In the midst of this hellish expanse, the team encountered Scorpion, his eyes burning with a vengeful glow. Upon hearing that Sub-Zero had been resurrected and bound to the Emperor, his stance softened. If the dead rise under Khan's command, I will make him regret it. He extended a hand, offering his dominion over this realm as a weapon against its ruler. Follow me. I know these pits. At the same time, Jade slipped into the shadows of a crumbling temple, where the sorcerer Quan Chi waited with a grin that seemed to distort the very air. Ravenous thunder descends upon the world, he murmured. The thunder god is exposed, his warriors cast into a furnace of eternal flame. Without the amulet, Khan will be stripped of his godlike might, and the realms will descend into chaos. He lifted his gauntlet, eyes flickering with dark fire. I will deal with Raiden. You, Jade, will carry our message. The amulet must be taken to the deepest pit, then destroyed. Jade stared into the abyss, feeling the weight of choice settle upon her like a mantle. If Kitana has decided her fate, I will decide mine. With fierce determination, she unsheathed her dagger, the blade humming as it absorbed the ambient heat. She felt the ebb and flow of the Netherrealm's energy coursing through her, preparing herself for the confrontation ahead. Sub-Zero emerged from a veil of icy vapor, his form altered, his eyes now a cold, merciless gleam. I have stepped out of the light, he declared, and now I belong to the shadows. The shadows obey me as I obey them. The sound of his voice was a shiver across the blistering landscape. A battle of fire and ice erupted between him and Scorpion, each clash sending shockwaves that rippled through the molten floor. Amidst the chaos, Johnny and Kano fought side by side, the amulet's faint blue glow pulsing between them like a heartbeat. Their blows were synchronized, a blend of raw power and calculated precision, and they finally seized the relic from the clutch of a twisted Netherrealm behemoth. Yet neither knew how to end its terrible power. Up above, in the central plaza of the castle, Sonya Blade and Liu Kang confronted Shao Kahn in a desperate final stand. The air crackled with the Emperor's dark magic, and his eyes burned with an ancient rage. He struck Liu Kang with a barrage of crushing force, shattering his ribs and sending him sprawling. Liu Kang's breath flared, his eyes widening in a last-minute revelation. Raiden told me, he whispered, I am not the chosen one. My death was meant to bring Kung Lao back. My purpose ends here. The Emperor, sensing the waning of Liu Kang's life, tightened his grip on the battlefield, but Sonya, undeterred, launched a fierce barrage that momentarily staggered Khan. Their fight teetered on the edge of oblivion, just 2 more deaths, and the tyrant would have Earthrealm shackled forever. In the maelstrom, Sonya, though battered, seized a fleeting moment to free Kitana from her shackles. The princess, sudden with renewed purpose, turned her gaze upon the Emperor. I fight for Earth, she proclaimed, the words ringing like a battle cry across the plaza. A flame reignited within her, a bright, defiant blaze that announced her return to the tournament as a true combatant. Without hesitation, she dove back into the fray, her blades singing of vengeance. Deep within the Netherrealm, Johnny clutched the amulet, its blue light throbbing against his palm. As his allies surged forward to claim it, he made a choice that would echo through the ages. With a roar that blended pain and resolve, he hurled himself over the edge of the abyss, falling into the swirling vortex of fire and shadows to keep the artifact from the Emperor's grasp. His body vanished into the churning darkness, the amulet spiraling after him. Scorpion, still locked in combat with Sub-Zero, felt the vacuum left by Johnny's sacrifice. The sorcerer Quan Chi appeared, his form glitching between realms, and together with Kano and a spectral Jade, they formed an uneasy alliance and surged toward the void where Johnny lay. Their combined assault battered the walls of the abyss, each strike a desperate attempt to retrieve the relic. In the plaza, Kitana, having been staggered by a vicious strike from Khan, rose once more, her determination a steel lattice that refused to bend. Johnny, bruised but alive after a harrowing fall, crawled back onto the stone floor, the memory of Raiden's teachings surfacing like a buried ember. He centered himself, feeling the chi within him coalesce, a calm eye amid the storm. Shao Kahn, ever the manipulator, offered Kitana a chilling pardon. Bow to me, and I will grant you mercy. She drew a breath, her eyes cold as the moonlit water of Edenia's lakes. Only one of us will walk away alive, she replied, and with that she turned her back on the Emperor, rejecting his empty promise. At that moment, Johnny finally succeeded in crushing the amulet against the basalt floor, the blue light exploding in a cascade of arcane shards. The rupture sent a shockwave through the realms. Lord Raiden's power surged back into his form, just as Quan Chi raised his hand to deliver a lethal strike. Simultaneously, the dark aura that had sustained Shao Kahn fractured, the armor of his invincibility cracking like brittle ice. Kitana, seizing the unfolding chaos, moved with a speed that blurred her silhouette. She recalled the last moments she had spent in Edenia, the memory of her father's counsel, the ribbon of blue that once marked her loyalty to a dead kingdom. With renewed vigor, she raised her fans, the wind howling as they sliced through the air. She ripped the Emperor's mask from his face, exposing the frail, mortal visage beneath. The crowd that had once cowered fell silent, then rose in a unified gasp as Kitana drove the final blow, beheading Shao Kahn and ending his tyrannical rule. The battlefield fell still. The survivors knelt, not in subservience, but in reverence for the fallen hero who had brought salvation. Kitana, crownless yet regal, lifted her head. "Edenia does not bow," she declared. "We stand proud, unshackled,